After back-to-back wins over Swansea and CSKA and finally getting the Wembley monkey off our back, we stupidly thought going into the Man United fixture, Spurs had turned a corner. However, Spurs, being Spurs, they never fail to surprise us. This is your e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Tottenham, Tottenham!
Hi guys, welcome back for another hour of talking all things Tottenham Hotspur. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Acast and get every new episode direct as it's released. You can of course follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Twitter and Instagram at e_Spurs. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/e-Spurs page. We're also on YouTube, Pinterest, Tumblr, the lot. And for all the links to all e-Spurs platforms, just head to our website, which is www.espurs.blogspot.co.uk. On the e-Spurs podcast tonight, we'll be talking about the narrow 1-0 defeat of Manchester United. We'll be briefly touching upon the CSKA game where we finally got that Wembley monkey off our backs. And we'll be looking forward to the Hull City fixture, which for you guys listening now will be tonight. So, before we talk all things Tottenham, let's introduce tonight's panel that will be taking us along for the next hour. How are we doing, fellas?
Still a bit down from Sunday.
I'm very well, Rick. Looking forward to tonight as ever. You know, it'd be good to talk about those three subjects, and then we can move on to what proves to be tonight's game. So happy days. Looking forward to it.
As always, guys, we like to always thank each and every one of you that take the time out to listen to the e-Spurs podcast. This week we've got a guest that listens to us all the way from Chicago in the USA. That's Anthony Cagini at the Cujo, who says, I found the podcast a couple of months ago and absolutely love it. And that's obviously what we like to hear. Guys, if any of you out there want to get in touch with the e-Spurs team, want to get a shout out on the e-Spurs podcast, all you've got to do is go to our Twitter, which is at e_Spurs. Mention the location where you're listening to us around the world and simply end your tweet with the hashtag eSpursPod, and you'll also get a mention on the e-Spurs podcast. So guys, and obviously we might not want to talk about it, we're going to have to review this Manchester United game. I think a lot of hope going into the fixture on the back of two good wins. Jace, was it just a simple case that, from my perspective looking at it, we just didn't seem to go there with any sense of belief that we could win the game? What was your view on the game itself?
Well, it was certainly a very flat performance, for sure. If anything, the scoreline flattered us a little because, you know, whilst Manchester United didn't look particularly great themselves, the chances that they had seemed to be more creative chances. They had the early one with Pogba. They had the shot that Hugo saved low down at the foot of the post. They then get their goal, which was the type of goal we'd love to score at the moment. I think just one simple through ball and a man outpacing the defender to tuck it away. And we just kind of laboured the whole game, didn't we? It was hard to see what the strategy was. There was a part really early in the game, only about 3 or 4 minutes in, where I think Rocco won the ball or made the tackle or whatever, but as he got up, Kane had a big grin on his face as if to say, I've got the beating of you, or you're following me where I want you to follow. And you thought, you know, maybe the idea is to get behind Darmian, drag Rocco out the middle and leave that space for Ali and that to burst into. But that part of the game never developed, did it? We just constantly saw Kane going down the touchline almost as a winger, and at no stage did we get the ball into the middle, or he couldn't hold it up when we needed to get it into the middle. So it was just a very frustrating afternoon, and we were certainly one of our poorest performances for some time.
Yeah, I agree. I think from reading on the social media over the weekend, what seems to have caused a bit of a split amongst fans, Jace, just want to get your opinion on this, is the Eric Dyer situation. Now, we can't get away from it. Eric Dyer last season for us was very much a physical presence in that midfield. Now, obviously, naturally, this season, there's been a case where Dyer has filled in when necessary. Is there a case where, with Wanyama there, Wanyama has been absolutely superb this season, and through no fault of his own, Dyer, unfortunately, hasn't been able to get into the team? Do you feel that Spurs lack an attacking threat moving forward when Wanyama plays as opposed to Dyer? What's your thoughts on that? Would you want to see him brought back in for Hull tonight?
Well, I think the question comes up purely because we lost the game. I mean, let's be fair, going into the game, Dyer hasn't looked the Eric Dyer of last season, albeit several times playing out of position. And most people are saying that Wanyama's been the best of our summer buys and has been probably week in, week out, our best player. So if we go into that game at Manchester United and we left Wanyama out and we play Dyer and we lose the game 1-0, everyone will be going mad and saying, why the hell did we leave Wanyama out, isn't it? It's one of those things, always wise to be, easy to be wise after the event. Wanyama, I think, possibly the question comes up even more this week because Wanyama had our best opportunity and for whatever reason he seems to want to head it sideways rather than at goal, and maybe Eric Dyer would have headed it at goal, I don't know. But the Dyer-Dembele combination was so big last year, and we haven't really seen it so much this year. But I don't think I don't think that would make that much difference to the overall play. I still think that the problem area with the creativity and the overall attacking play is in the three behind Kane, and then when Kane plays or when Jensen plays, it's those four really. I think that is the concern amongst all the creative input of the team.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and it was just simply a case where we've sat here the last couple of weeks and praised Eriksen for looking like getting back to his normal self. And again, like I said, at the weekend he went missing. But then, like I say, we've sat on this pod and also we have to put our hands up. Dele Alli went missing. Heung-min Son went missing. Harry Kane. So there's more a case than just for one player. It was simply the team, from my perspective, looking at the game, just seemed to lack that belief. Ian, bringing you in, how did you see it? You was there, so tell us your thoughts about the game. What did you make of it watching it pitch side?
I think, from my perspective, we had no cutting edge. There was nothing, to get us interested in or for us to get behind the team with. Normally with Spurs, you're hopeful that you get you force their keeper into some saves. And whilst I think De Gea had a few saves to make from Eriksen's free kicks, there wasn't a lot more going on. And I just found that, as the game progressed, Kane's and Ali's positions seemed to recede further and further away from the Man United goal as the game progressed, to the point where they were playing just a tad in front of Dembele when he was on and Wanyama. So that was the thing for me. I think Eriksen, I don't know, did he go missing out of the top four? What you mentioned, Rick. For me, he was the one that sort of forced De Gea into some saves, and I can't really recall any of the others doing likewise during the game. It was a very frustrating game because I think we all went up there with a little bit of hope, and as I said on the last pod, I didn't fear the trip, and to be honest, I come away from there on Sunday thinking, well, that was a very strange game, and I echo what Jason said. 1-0 sort of flattered the game really, because Manchester United, if they'd have turned up the heat, I think that they could have inflicted greater loss on us. So yeah, strange game.
It was indeed, and I think the frustrating thing is, I think the underriding thing is that we went into this game as fans fully confident, and that just didn't seem to transmit to the players. And you have to ask the question why that was the case. We're talking about a Man United side that haven't won at home in 11 weeks. We're talking about a Man United side that really, as a squad, all right, they've spent a lot of money, but they're not really physically a team as such. They did have some players out as well. Juan Mata starting on the bench, that always seems to give the Spurs team a nightmare. It just seemed to be that feeling that, we just didn't seem to have that belief to go into the game and to look to win it. And I have to ask about this pressing game. And we've seen Spurs impose this pressing game for the majority of the season. That just didn't seem there at all on Saturday. And if it was at all, it just wasn't in sustained periods. Coming back to you, Jace, do you feel, I think Harry Kane's come out and said tonight that Spurs, we need to find a different way of adapting. Teams are starting to find us out. Does Pochettino need to change the system? Do we need to maybe look at someone like an Nkudu to maybe freshen things up? What's your thoughts on that? Do we need to change things?
Well, we certainly need something to change because we do look very sluggish and lethargic. Certainly, I thought with Eriksen on Sunday, the only defence I'd give him amongst the four attacking players, Son's real strength is trying to run in and behind the defence, and that's usually what Dele Alli does. But neither of them made a run for Eriksen to find with a through ball. So, I'm not excusing Christian Eriksen's performance by any means. It was another 5 or 6 out of 10 for Christian Eriksen, but I think there was more mitigating circumstances in his poor performance. I mean, Dele Alli's touch, for instance, on Sunday was appalling. I mean, he constantly seemed to lose control of the ball, and from him, and he had that chance, didn't he, to shoot quite late in the game. I don't know, about 75, 80 minutes, when I think the ball ended up coming through to him, and you think Dele Alli of normally would shoot, and for some reason he turned backwards, didn't even want to have a shot. So I think certainly something has to change in that attacking area of the field to a degree. I think Kane's right. Teams have worked us out. They're not allowing themselves to be pressed. They kind of smash it straight back down our field and say, right, you can have the ball with Vertonghen and Alderweireld rather than us trying to pass it round the back. And probably the only team that has done that against us was Man City, and we were able to press them and were able to rob them. So I think to a degree we want to press teams. I'm sure Pochettino still has that in his mind, but teams are finding a way to stop us doing it, and that's becoming the problem in the same way that Chelsea stopped us doing it the further the game went. In terms of Nkudu, I think you seriously have to look at it and think we have Hull City and Burnley at home when you've got 3 games in 7 days, so you can use rotation as an excuse. You're playing against a team, let's be fair, you should be able to beat at home. They're shipping goals right, left and centre at the moment, Hull, and you really feel if he doesn't start Wednesday night, you struggle to see when the hell he will get a start. So for me, I would like to see Nkudu come in, possibly for the expense of Son, although I still wouldn't leave Eriksen out the side just yet.
Yeah, no, again, I think that's a fair point. I think, like we've touched upon in this pod, we do need to find a different way of playing. And it's all very well when you can, you can beat the likes of Manchester City the way we done and those one-off performances, but we need to be doing it on a more consistent basis. And don't get me wrong, we all love this high-pressing game that Poch has adopted at Tottenham, but there needs to be different ways of winning. And I think that's what we're struggling at the moment in terms of trying to find different ways of playing in terms of breaking down the opposition. Ian, coming to you, there does seem to be a few murmurings about Pochettino. I don't think anyone can question how far he's taken Spurs in terms of the league. I think we have to also remind ourselves that the Manchester United defeat was only our 4th away defeat in 27 Premier League away games. Pochettino himself, Ian, I think substitution seems to be kind of this reoccurring theme amongst Spurs fans, that he doesn't seem to make them earlier enough. What's your thoughts on that? Is he delaying potentially changing a game because of his lack of timing in terms of the substitutions? Have you got an opinion on that at all?
I think that for me, let's talk about Pochettino first, and then I'll come to your next question about the subs. For me, and Pochettino, I suppose, with someone of my years who've grown up with sort of like the daily paper and only getting your news once a day perhaps, and then maybe at the evening news or sports bulletin, to someone now where you get a rolling sort of feed on Sky News. We have come to the sort of time where this isn't working this week, so let's change it all and see if it works next week. And I think that for me, if we were to get rid of Poch now, it would be it would be just a major embarrassment, and for my money, the totally wrong decision to make. Now, going back to the subs, answering the second part of your question, Rick, I can understand what people are saying. Maybe there is this issue about, thinking about how many miles they're running, how many sort of time that they start to get jaded throughout a game, and maybe it's gone a bit more sort of scientific than we think it is. Now, if he changes something and it doesn't work, he's damned, and he's damned if he changes it too late. I think that there has been times when, when we talked about him earlier on in Kudu, when I think it was the game at the CSKA away, and he sort of changed the game, and I think he had a positive impact for the CSKA home game. So maybe it is time to see him on the pitch.
Yeah, and you touched upon there, Harry Winks getting a start. I think with 2 games in a space of 4 days, I do think we're going to see some changes to the side. Wouldn't surprise me seeing possible changes at full-back, with Ben Davies now back 100% and Kieran Trippier maybe coming in. Harry Winks, I'm sure, will get his opportunity. Jace, coming to you just to kind of wrap up the game itself against Manchester United. I want to try and end on a high, because at the end of the day, Moussa Sissoko, our alleged 30 million deadline day signing, played quite well. He looks like he responded to Pochettino's criticism. We had Toby Alderweireld making his full Premier League start for the first time in 7.5 weeks. He came through unscathed. We've got 2 winnable home fixtures coming up, one of them being tonight. Just to kind of end it with you trying to end it on a high, is there any kind of optimism on that part? I think Sissoko is potentially going to maybe feature tonight, or whether that be Sunday. Have we seen a player there that has acknowledged the criticism from Pochettino and looks to have maybe turned a corner?
I don't know yet if he's turned a corner, but he certainly came on, and his final product wasn't great, let's be fair, but at least he was prepared to take his man on and got beyond his man. You know, in that Leverkusen game at Wembley, it was just horrific, wasn't it, when he lost the ball, 37 times? I mean, at least it wasn't like that. And in such a poor performance, then his little cameo role certainly stood out, and you thought, well, at least somebody here is prepared to have a go. But part of that was probably the frustration of the first 70 minutes of thinking, why didn't somebody else want to have a go like he did? But it was just a performance that hopefully gives him a little bit of confidence and just gives him something to build on. You know, as I still say, you can argue about how much money Sissoko was. You can argue whether he's any good or not. But for me, I still look at a person that's got 50 caps for France. And so, yes, he played in a relegated side, but didn't Jermaine Defoe play in a relegated side and we bought him? Didn't Scott Parker play in a relegated side and we bought him? So you can't just say because he was playing in a relegated side he's a poor player. And as I say, when you've got 50 caps for France in a midfield where they can pick from Matuidi, they can pick from Pogba, players like that, there must be some form of player inside him. And the only other thing I would say about the criticism was, and I think I pointed that out at the time we bought him, is in that Rafa Benitez, who, you know, whether you like Benitez's style of management or not, let's be fair, he is a proper football person, Rafa Benitez. He's worked with some top players at some top clubs. And he goes to Newcastle and he made him captain. And from that moment on, they didn't lose a game. So again, it tells you there must be something within him that some can see. Now, we haven't seen it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not justifying his transfer. I'm not justifying the £30 million player. But you can't tell me this is a run-of-the-mill, absolutely useless player that's got no right to be in the Premier League, as some people are writing about him. You know, we're somewhere in between. And we started to see just a tiny glimpse of, you know, maybe he is a better player than we're giving him credit for, albeit, no, he's not going to be the man that saves our season.
Yeah, and like I say, you put up a good fight there, Jason. I think the problem is, like, as we all know, being on social media, especially Twitter, it very much is a case of all one way or all the other way. Either it's absolutely fantastic or if it's diabolically awful, and you never kind of get that in between thing on Twitter. It is very, very funny like that, depending if you can take it or leave it. But there's most certainly a player in there, like you've just touched upon. You know, you don't get the caps he has for France, the amount of caps he's had for France, if he's a poor player.
The problem on Twitter, mate, is you'll get people that talk about a transfer. We won't go into transfer policy, but they'll say, if you're trying to buy a player, look, if we think this player is going to improve us, just pay the money. Doesn't matter what it costs us, just pay the money. If he's going to improve us, pay it. And then you pay it, and then someone says, why did we pay 30 million for him?
Yeah, I understand.
You know, so you get that. I mean, let's
be
be fair, Eric Lamella's had it, for 3 seasons? He doesn't look a £30 million player. So, you know, either the fee does matter or the fee doesn't. And then you'll also get someone that will criticise, say, a fee for Sissoko, but they'll say, we should go and buy X player. And you think, but clubs like that will charge 25, 30 million for those players as well. So you can't have it all ways. Can't have it always.
No, and like I say, I think it's a case. John has made a very good point in this podcast when he's been on, and he said that it isn't our money. But at the same time, you know, I do have to remind fans, and fans know that anyway, that we are saving for a stadium. You know, there is a business plan in place for Spurs. Not everyone may like that business plan, but it is to the benefit of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Some may not feel that's the case. Some may feel there is a lack of ambition from Daniel Levy. And believe me, I've been the first one on this podcast to say, at critical times, there hasn't been the investment that all of us would want. But at the end of the day, we don't oversee the figures, we don't oversee the plan. But I think the frustration as of the United game, just to kind of wrap this up, is that you see the likes of Man City, Liverpool dropping points this weekend. Of course, there's a relief that these teams don't build, obviously, any more points on us. But it's equally grating that we haven't capitalised on both sides. And I think, looking at it as a general thing, you know, we ended this weekend 10 points off top spot, 3 points off the current top 4, and a point better off than last season. So I do think there has to be that sense of perspective that we're not far off where we want to be. But at the same time, we can't get away from the fact that this time last year, you know, I do think the performances were of a better standard, and you can only hope that we are going to be able to discover that standard, and Pochettino is the right man. And, you know, you've got to back the manager. At the end of the day, that all these players are tying themselves down to long-term deals, you would hope that's because they love the manager. So, fingers crossed, we get back to winning ways against Hull. And like I say, we've got the game at the weekend as well. Burnley, they're 2 winnable games, and we could be sitting here next week talking about 6 points. Fingers crossed. So, we're going to move on, guys. We're going to briefly touch upon the Europa League. Yes, the Europa League. Kind draw for Spurs, some may say. Not too far in terms of location and possible progression dependent on how Poch views the tournament. I know guys have gone and spoke about this quite a few times on the pod. Just very briefly, lads, what do you make of the draw? Coming to you first, Ian?
We all think that that it's a kind draw, but haven't they had some really good results in the Europa League up to now?
Yeah, they're not a bad side. I think they were looking at it from the perspective that it's not far for Spurs to travel, and in terms of who else they could have got, it's a kind draw on that basis. But I think we're not silly enough to know that, dependent if Poch chooses to use it as a youth exercise, then it may not be a good draw. So just wanted your take on that.
I think if Poch treats it with the respect it deserves over the two legs, I'd like to hope that we could proceed in the competition. But then this is someone that went to Dortmund with a bit of really sort of enthusiasm for the tie, and then you look at the team that was put out on that night and you think, well, he's not really taking it this seriously, is he? I just hope that we do target some silverware. I want to see us win things, and this competition and the FA Cup now offers us, in my view, the best opportunity.
No, totally agree. And quickly, Jace, to you, what's your quick thoughts on it? What do you think?
The travelling part, I think, was the most important from the issues. We didn't fancy a trip to Rostov in the middle of February when it's freezing cold and everything like that. So, trip to Belgium should be good for the club. It should be fantastic for the supporters, nice and easy to get to. Ideally a nice safe place as well. Some of those Eastern European trips can be a bit dicey for the fans, can't they? So from that point of view, it should be good. I think they're looking forward to it as well. I think they're going to play their 100th European fixture at Wembley. I think that's their notable thing. So, good one for them. And let's be fair. It's a tie we should win. It's a tie we should win. I think we should win both legs of the tie anyway. So hopefully we can go out there, get the result, come back to Wembley, and if he wants to rotate the squad in the second leg, so be it, albeit that, as we further go into the competition, it's a competition I want to win, because I'd sooner win that and get into the Champions League that way than spend all season trying to scrape fourth and go into a playoff round and things like that. Come on, let's try and take a competition seriously, win a trophy, and go into the to the Champions League next year as a more respected side, and kind of repair the reputation that we've damaged by our group stains this year.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, God, if we need to give teams any more motivation to win at Wembley, well, there's one for Ghent. So we'll have to wait and see. And again, I wouldn't like to predict the tie. I think it very much is dependent on whether Pochettino tries to use it as a youth exercise, or if he actually sees it as a winnable competition. Because, listen, look at our league form. It's not great at the moment. So, you would think that's another avenue for the Champions League. So it'll be very interesting to see when that tie does come around in February, how he wants to take it. So, guys, that's the review of the Europa League draw. Now, as of every week, as you guys know, we ask you to get in touch with us with any questions you've got for the panel. Again, this week you've been in touch, as you always do, with numerous different questions on numerous different subjects. So we're going to try our best to filter through what we've got. I'm going to come to you first, Jace. Another popular one this week from Devra Campay, who joined us last week on the pod. He's asked us here, so, our bench, does it make any difference to a game? That is a question.
It depends what the bench is, doesn't it?
Well,
at the moment, let's be fair, I think the bench makes a difference. If you have, let's say, 18 genuine first-team players, what I call, any one of those 18 you feel can come in and not do a job for you, but actually really impact on a game. And we don't have 18 players of that, do we? Janssen is a backup, but that's it. He's a backup option. He's not coming in making an impact. So you are looking at the bench at the moment. You are looking at a few young players, and you are looking at players you think, well, they'll come on, but really it's just like for like, and it's not going to change anything. No, a bench doesn't make any difference to the game. And certainly, maybe it doesn't make it does in some games, but I think that what Dev's getting at is when you're playing against those Manchester Cities, the Chelseas, the Arsenals, have we got a bench to change it? Then, we have to be honest at the moment and say that we haven't at the moment.
Yeah, no, fair point. And I have to say, again, I look at the bench against Manchester United and you're thinking to yourself, who is going to come on that's going to change this game? And to be fair, you know, the likes of Nkuda are on there, Harry Winks. Harry Winks is a young Spurs Academy player. Yes, he can pass the ball. We've seen that, you know, when he's come on. But he's not someone that's going to change the game. And Nkuda, again, a young player, yet to be given a chance. We're yet to see what he's about. I think it's too much to kind of ask these boys to come on and change a game. Ian, coming to you. I know we keep talking about this question. Last week on the pod, you was very adamant that as much as your original thoughts were you'd like to see Spurs invest, you were quite confident in the squad we've got at the moment. On the back of that United game, I know we don't want to be too knee-jerk, but has your opinion of that changed? Do you think Spurs may need to go into the transfer market?
I'm going to go back to what I said last week and some of the comments that Jason has so succinctly made in the past when it comes to who is there. As Jason quite rightly said last week with Jermaine Defoe, we're not going to get a Jermaine Defoe type player from another Premier League team at this point in time, and not unless we're prepared to spend silly money, which, as you've said, you know, Pochettino's already sort of hinted that things may well be a bit quiet for us in January. So, if there was a player out there who I thought was available and we could get him for a decent amount of money and the wages were great, then excellent. You know, let's get him in. But you know, why would another Premier League team sell a player that's going to upgrade one of ours? I don't get it. I can't see it happening, really.
No, I think that's fair enough. And just as we're with you, Ian, we've got a question here. Well, I say a question, more of a statement here from KJ William, and he's saying we should be looking to offload Eriksen, who hasn't progressed, and bring in someone in the form of Payet. Now, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I look at Payet, for me, he looks like a Tottenham Hotspur player, but John often reminds me, as does you lads, that we're talking about a guy that is 27 years of age. As we know under Daniel Levy, he likes to sign young players that he can eventually sell on for a higher value. Payet wouldn't fall into that bracket, and I don't think it's a case of Spurs buying a player for the now. Would you also echo those sentiments, that you don't think Spurs would look to bring in a player that's pretty much been there, done it? Obviously, Alderweireld is the only one that kind of screams out that a player had Premier League pedigree, and we brought him in. Could you see Spurs going for a Payet? I know it's pretty unrealistic because I can't see West Ham selling him, but would you like to see Spurs go for that kind of calibre of player and maybe give up an Eriksen?
Let's look at the economies of scale here. You know, if you sell Eriksen and you sell Tommy Carroll, which has been moved here earlier on today, and you think to yourself, well, okay, it's gonna take the combined value of those two to get in a player like Payet or you know, dare I say it, Mahrez. You know, any of those type of players, yes, they would make life more interesting for us in the final third, you know, and they're both the sort of players that I think are Tottenham Hotspur players, but I don't think we would afford them. It's maybe looking at, if we're going to strengthen, looking, you know, further afield to who there is. And I think one of the biggest things that worry me, and I know you touched on it all about, you know, 3 or 4 months ago, Rick, is, you know, I'm hearing now that potentially we're going to get another head of recruitment in, you know, because I think they've accepted that this Mitchell going, you know, may be a bit of an issue. But, you know, in January, I can't see us doing much in the way of, you know, investing in players. We might allow a few to go out because it will help our wage bill, but that's about as far as it can go, mate, I think.
Coming to you, Jace, on that, Pochettino's announced at his press conference before Manchester United that Spurs will be intent on looking to replace the director of football. Now, God, we've had quite a few, haven't we, down the years? The likes of Frank Arneson. We've had the likes of Damien Comolli in there. We've had Franco Baldini. How imperative is it that the decision that Spurs take in terms of that football director is solely Pochettino's choice? Because what we've seen in the past is that pretty much the person that comes in who's the director of football seems to have the majority of the standing in terms of which players bring in. Now, back to the point I was just quickly making about Payet and Mahrez, I don't for 1 minute do see Leicester and West Ham selling us those kind of players because, like I say, it's just they're not unobtainable for Spurs. Those clubs wouldn't sell to Spurs. But would you see, Jace, any chance of Spurs moving for that kind of calibre of player if indeed, like Ian says, we aren't really with our director of football at the moment? Mitchell is serving his notice. Can you see any movement being done on that basis that we won't have a kind of director of football in place?
I think if you offered Pochettino a player that he was 100% convinced of was going to massively improve us, then absolutely I think he'd wanted to bring him in if it's January. But the problem is he's identifying the one, isn't it? I mean, January transfers, to me, you want somebody that's coming in and hitting the blocks running there and then. You can't bring a foreign player in that's going to take 2 months to get used to the pace of the game and things like that, because then we're at the end of March and everyone will then, be on his back. So I think, the likes of Premier League players, and you look around, who would make a difference? I think all of us, if we take our biased hat on, think Payet's an excellent player. But there are also games where Dimitri Payet does absolutely nothing. And when he does nothing, boy, does he do nothing, because he's a liability then going backwards. So he scores a lovely free kick again on Saturday. But West Ham are down the bottom of the league, and there are plenty of people saying he's looked totally uninterested all season. So I think we'd have more chance of buying the Olympic Stadium off of West Ham than Payet. Like Defoe, they're right down the bottom of the league.
Yeah.
He is crucial to them. And let's be fair, West Ham would not want to sell him to Tottenham. So if I said to somebody, would you take Payet as a player? Yes. Would you pay £60 million, £50 million for Payet at 29 years old? They might, and he's on 125 grand a week now for the next 4 years?
That's laughable,
in the space of 4 years, would people be saying when Payet's 31, my God, this bloke's on 135 grand a week, and he just can't be bothered to move. So, the club also looks at the whole term of a contract, doesn't it? It's not that simple. The last January sale last January buy that we made that probably had an impact on us was Palacios, that came in where we had a role for him to fill, and he did that role brilliantly for 6 months, in fact, probably for 18 months, Palacios, didn't he? But even then, with a player like Palacios, we loved him when we signed him because he did everything that we weren't getting. But then after about a year, people kept saying, but he keeps giving the ball away and he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that. Yeah. So, you also have that. It's brilliant bringing somebody in and you see a difference, but it's not always the difference you want, or sometimes the difference comes with, well, actually, he's not actually doing that part of his job, though, is he? And he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that. And Payet would make no attempt to defend and things like that. So it's not that easy. And you look at some of the other players. Would you go for Cesc Fabregas? Now, there's a creative passer. But if we went for Cesc Fabregas, and by the way, I'm not saying we should do, but could you imagine the reaction of the supporters? Exactly. Yeah. And there's a player, let's be fair, that would make a difference to us.
Of course.
And that Chelsea, I think, if they got the right offer, would sell him for. But how many of us would want him? If you looked and said, would you go for Oxlade-Chamberlain to bring us some pace? Or Giroud, who'd be a genuine backup or play alongside? I'm not saying they're top players, but they might come in and make a difference. But there's not a single supporter that will want to buy one of those. So it's not that easy, is it? Come on.
No, it's not. And I think, like I say, in hindsight, you look at certain players. I think, Jason, you've mentioned on this pod, the likes of Mkhitaryan, the likes of Götze. It's all very well having an eye for these players and saying they would improve the squad. But then, like I say, 2 or 3 months down the line, they haven't really done much. Now, we're not suggesting for 1 minute Spurs shouldn't have that ambition to go and get these players. But it doesn't mean, like you've said, the point that if you get these players, that they're going to ultimately perform and change your season around. However, we will come back to the point that the bench doesn't have that many options, and you could argue it does look like it needs improving. Coming to the final part of tonight's podcast, we're going to obviously preview Hull tonight, which you guys will be listening to. Coming first to you, Ian, I think critical we take this game very, very seriously and look to get 3 points. We've seen teams come to White Hart Lane, put 11 men behind the ball and come for a point. Again, it's going to be a case tonight of trying to break an opposition down that are going to do that exact thing. Can Spurs do that? What do you think?
I think that there's also the added issue of a lot of our own coming back to potentially grace the pitch again at White Hart Lane, for the last time in their careers. And, I'd have thought that the likes of the Dawsons, the Huddlestons, the Livermores, the Masons, etc., that they'll all want to come and enjoy their last hurrah at White Hart Lane. And they'll probably have a little bit more of an inside knowledge of potentially how Poch sets the team up. So I think it's going to be really important for us to go out and maybe try something different, as Harry Kane's alluded to. break down a team that I think will come with two banks of four, and maybe 1-on-1 or 2, and try and defend deep and then hit us on the break, which a lot of teams do when they come to White Hart Lane.
Yep, indeed, and like you say there, it is all about finding the balance. With obviously 2 games in 4 days, we are expecting there to be some possible changes. What we do know, Jace, is that Moussa Dembele isn't fit for the game, so most likely Eric Dyer will seamlessly slot in that midfield, most likely, or possibly Harry Winks. How do you see it tomorrow? Like I say, I repeat the same question to you. We're going to face a whole side that are pretty much going to come and try and shut up shop. Have we got to find a different way of playing that maybe we haven't done? And are we going to see Nkudu maybe get a start? I think many fans are calling out for him to get a start at least. What do you think?
Well, I think in terms of midfield, I think it will definitely be Winks. And I think Dyer might well come back and they'll take the opportunity to give Wanyama a rest as such. So it wouldn't surprise me if it is Dyer and Winks in there. In terms of going forward, I think Son's played the last few games, hasn't made the impact he did earlier in the season. And for me personally, I would say to Nkudu, right, as I said earlier, if you're not going to start him at home to Hull and either Hull or at home to Burnley, when are you going to start the boy? So, White Hart Lane, a home game against a team that, let's be fair, we should be beating, and we know that they're going to struggle to battle to stay up. For me, I would play with Nkudu and say, right, come on, give me at least an hour, show me what you can do. But the important thing for him to be allowed to do, I think, with Nkudu, we're so desperate to see somebody play with a bit of cut and thrust themselves that I just hope that if he does try and take his man on and he gets tackled the first 3 times, that the crowd almost jump onto the backs of this fella and, that collective sigh goes around the ground every time he gets tackled. So, just because we play him with a bit of pace and he looks the type of player that can go past someone, we've got to bear in mind, I'm yet to find a winger that skins his fullback 100% of the time and 10 times a game. So, but I would go with Nkudu, absolutely. As I say, I'd still pick Eriksen in the game, when probably would have, I'd always have Dele Alli in my side. So, and hopefully Kane won't play as a winger and it'll play down the middle and that Ali can run in and off him. But let's be fair, Hull have conceded, I think, more goals than anyone in the league. So we should be able to break them down as much as they park the bus. I don't care how much they might have wanted to park the bus. They haven't found a bus big enough yet against hardly any side. So, they're going to have to bring one of those big Boeing double-decker jets, I think, rather than just a bus. So, I'm quite confident we'll win the game, and I think we'll end up, a bit like Swansea, creating that many chances, whether we take them all or not. But I'd expect us to win by 2 or 3 goals for sure.
Yeah, and I think, like I say, it's imperative, I think, like you just said, Jace, that we try and remain patient. I think White Hart Lane has been one of those stadiums where if we don't score in that first 45 minutes, there is that, I hate to say it, we had it last season where it was brilliant. There was that belief around the stadium that no matter what happened, and I refer back to the Swansea game last season where we were 1-0 down, we turned the game on its head very, very late and got 2 goals in the last 10 minutes. We need to bring that kind of spirit back tonight to the Lane, where if the result isn't going to plan in the first 45 minutes, even the hour, and it's 0-0, that we still stick with the team, especially now because confidence is low. You can't fool it. The confidence is low of the team, and I think Harry has said, like we've said tonight, that unfortunately teams are starting to find us out, and the more the fans put that pressure on the players, it doesn't help. And good news is, in terms of the injury front, Lamela isn't looking too far away now. Dembele looks like he could be back for Burnley, so that's a positive. Jace, shall we come to you first?
As I said, I won't go correct score, but I'll say I think our margin of victory will be by 3.
Okay, we'll take that. We'll most certainly take that the way it's counted at the moment. And Ian, what do you think?
2-1 Spurs.
2-1, okay. It's going to be one of those edgy ones at the Lane. God, it's going to be a cold night as well. Let's hope we put the game beyond them before half-time at least. John, obviously I'll stand on for John again in terms of his results. I know John was here, he go with quite a positive victory. We should get back to winning ways. I'll mark John down for a 3-0. And finally myself, I think we are going to get back to winning ways. I think it's imperative that we do get a result tomorrow night, just to kind of subside the atmosphere just around at the moment. I think we had that winning feeling firmly back in our grasp. We need that feeling back, especially going into a very, very big Christmas period where the fixtures come fast. So I am going to go with I'm going to go 3-0 Spurs. I'm quite confident that we will get back to winning ways. Okay, guys, so that's all we've got time for on this week's podcast. Guys, as we've always said, you can subscribe to the podcast every week via iTunes or Acast.
Can't wait for it, mate. Looking forward to it tomorrow. And it will be really nice to see a couple of the old boys back, because you and me were lucky to go and see Ledley last night at the Spurs show, which was a great night. But over the past few years, we've been lucky to see Tottenham out in Asia while we've been there. And I tell you, there weren't two better people to mix with supporters than Michael Dawson and then Ryan Mason, was it 18 months ago? Those two had so much time for the supporters. They took part in all the supporters' events when they were very much, players rather than ex-players. So,
yeah, well, we always try and labour on the perfect therapy. Let's hope this one is, as you listen to this on the build-up to kick-off. And all there's time now to say is, come on, you Spurs.
Tottenham, Tottenham, no one can stop them.